It's election night in Washington state, and we expect to see the first returns in just minutes. Several big races are on the ballot this year, including Initiative 976. Will car tabs be capped at $30? Or will voters preserve billions of dollars for transportation projects and road maintenance?
Our communities, our livelihoods, it all depends on us rejecting Initiative 976 by November 5th.
It is truly one of the most laughable arguments that the opponents make.
Affirmative action is on the ballot.
This allows us to restore fairness and opportunity and create a level playing field.
Will voters approve or reject a decision by the legislature to include race as a factor in public education and government contracts?
We don't need something like this.
7 races are up for grabs within the Seattle City Council. 3 incumbents are trying to maintain power as several new faces stand poised to win a seat. Snohomish County Sheriff Ty Trineri is being challenged from within the ranks by Sergeant Adam Fortney. Voters will decide 4 Tacoma City Council races, and will federal Wade residents pass a pot measure? This is a King 5 News special presentation, Decision 2019. Here's your host, Chris Daniels.
And good evening, and thank you for joining us. The drop boxes are now closed, and it's going to be an exciting night ahead as the numbers come in from around the state and around the Puget Sound region on this election night 2019. Whether it's the big state races, the city council, local levies, or school boards, we will be here online, on the King 5 app, on YouTube, and on Facebook. Thank you for watching. I'd like to welcome first our 2 special guests here on the evening in the King 5 newsroom. It is Shasti Conrad, the head of the King County Democrats, and Marco Lowe, who is the political science professor at Seattle University. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
We've got a lot to talk about, but first I want to show you some video of last-minute voting as the voters got in their ballots in those drop boxes and in their mail boxes late this evening. This was the scene at the King County Elections headquarters in Renton. A steady stream of cars rolling through as people place their ballots in the boxes. The King County Elections Department hopes to see 43% turnout this election, which is about 571,000 ballots. As of 6 o'clock tonight, however, 423,000 had been returned. That's about 32% of all registered voters in the county. It will take several days or even longer to process the pile. That did not stop Tim Eyman tonight, just a few minutes ago, from cutting a cake, celebrating, declaring victory already on Initiative 976. This is the $30 car tab initiative. Yes, he did speak. Yes, he declared victory as he cut the cake there before the numbers had even dropped. And that's what we are waiting on right now, those numbers, as we look at Tim Eyman, ever the character, no matter how you feel about him. He likes to get on his T-shirt and goes around to talk about the initiatives that he's backing in that particular race. So as we wait for those numbers to come in, Shasti, first of all with you, what are you looking for tonight?
Well, I mean, there's really exciting races. We had an incredible diverse spectrum of candidates running in this cycle. For Seattle City Council, obviously, is the big one that everyone's paying attention to. But for County Council and for, we've across this county, we've got really incredible candidates running. So we're watching that one. Obviously, referendum 88 is very important. We're watching that one really closely. And then, we just want to make sure that we're supporting our candidates and we're getting them out there.
Marco?
Nationally, we're watching Kentucky, Virginia, and all the Democratic sweeps going on there. Agree with Shasti. Also, 976 is a big vote that we just watched Tim Eyman announce victory. Hopefully, he washed his hands. I would also say, City of Seattle is important. King County is important. Port of Seattle race that's interesting. Sam Cho and Grant Denninger is on. King County Medic 1 is up tonight. So it's going to be a really exciting night for what we would otherwise call an off-year election.
And there's going to be a lot of talk as we go on here throughout the hour about the amount of money, particularly in Seattle, that has been pitched into this race. There's also going to be talk about voter turnout. I mean, looking at voter turnout already in Snohomish and Pierce County, it's right around the 20% mark in the ballots that have already been returned. Extremely low, especially in this off year. King County, a little bit better, but you heard the projection. It's supposed to be in the 40s, right now in the 30s. And then what those numbers look like, particularly in the city of Seattle, as I was telling you off camera, as Shasti was alluding to with the city council races and all the attention on the city council races. Right now, District 6, which is the Heidi Wills, Dan Strauss race, Ballard and that whole area, that has had the highest number of returns thus far.
You know, it's not surprising to me that the Ballard race has been very contentious in the last few weeks. You got a lot of political history out there, particularly Heidi Wills being a former council member. So I think all of these races are going to see a lot of turnout. And I think tonight may be the 50% mark when we see that vote dropped. So we'll see a lot of ballots coming in. I think normally we'd peg it around 60%. So we may see a late, these ballot boxes were rumored to be stuffed today, not the old term like from maybe Chicago politics, but people were putting them in so fast King County had to do early withdrawals. So I think we will see elections decided maybe beyond tonight.
I think this general election is the first one since the Voting Rights Act was passed in the legislature earlier this year. And so I definitely think this is probably a race that it's going to take a few days before we have results and we have some answers. But it's one that, we're already higher in voter turnout in King County at this time than we were in 2017 or 2015. So I'm hopeful that we will see the bump and the same day voter registration will make a difference in voter turnout in the coming days.
Yeah, one of the other races, there's quite a few King County council seats that are up for election. Larry Gossett, who is a civil rights icon, beloved in the community, has been on the King County Council since 1993, is going up against a political newcomer in Girmay Zalalai, who in the primary beat Gossett by 20 points, and Gossett has not had a challenger since 1999. So I think a lot of people believe they know what the outcome is going to be tonight. But Larry Gossett even said after that primary he had to go out and campaign for the first time in a long time. Any thoughts on that race?
Yeah, I mean, we endorsed Girmay out of King County Democrats, where he's a really exciting candidate. He's sort of that, amazing package of really amazing community ties, Ethiopian immigrant family, and has really done a lot for his community. And I think is really speaking to a lot of the dynamics that we've seen in some of these races across the country, also of this sort of new candidate, new blood, new energy, really pushing for some new ideas. And I think it has really given Councilmember Gossett a run for his money, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and those King County races are kind of interesting because they're district, but they don't have the profile of the Seattle races, so you don't have all the money pouring in. So a true doorbeller, and Girmay doorbelled, can knock out anybody. Attorney General Ferguson started his political career knocking out then Councilmember Cynthia Sullivan in a big upset.
All right, so I am being told in my ear that we have our first batch of numbers. Are you ready? Out of King County, and we can start with Initiative 976. And I think that we could sit here and predict that perhaps King County would go this way, but 56% of voters rejecting right now. And again, this is only King County. This is the $30 car tab initiative. There's a thought that perhaps Eastern Washington is going to go completely the other direction. But as you both know, King County carries a lot of weight as one of the biggest counties in this country.
Looks like Tim should have waited to cut that cake.
Not to be pro-cake cutting, but I would say if I was hoping to see, if I was 976 campaign, I would like to see a reject in King County of over 60, just to kind of carry that, because I think we're going to see much smaller, but counties in Eastern Washington be 70% or more.
And as we talked about coming into tonight, the polling from the No on I-976 folks, they were not optimistic based on the polling. That they felt that they had closed a gap in the last couple of months with the blitz of campaign ads, all the big money behind that campaign, but they were a little pessimistic coming into tonight.
There's few things you can count on.
Let's go down the line, I'm told. We have a lot of numbers.
Okay.
All right, referendum 88. In King County only, again, King County only approved 61% to 39 right now. What do you think?
I am surprised that it's that high. I mean, King County is a progressive county, but to be all the money spent on the other race, and this kind of ran under the radar, and even some confusion over what does yes or no mean. That number, I mean, we'll see how it goes statewide, but that's better to carry some, tallies.
Yes, cautiously optimistic, but that makes me feel good. Yeah.
All right, on to the next numbers. Resolution 8200, legislative emergency powers. This was one that kind of flew under the radar in the build up to this election. You probably further down on your ballot may have checked this one off, but right now in King County only 75% approving, 25% rejecting.
I feel better. We don't have to worry about the tsunamis as much, so okay, good.
All right, now we get into the state Senate, and I know, Shasti, you pay attention to a lot of these Senate and legislative races. What do you make here of Liz Levitt at 75%, the Republican Daniel Miller at 25%?
It's just affirming what the party had decided earlier this year. So I feel great about that. She did a great job in this legislative session this past year and deserved to stay in her seat. So that's great.
It's just we're seeing a continuation of a Democratic wave that we saw, on the East Coast as well, and seen in districts like the 40th that used to be a much more competitive district.
And again, we're still just talking about King County numbers. So if we go on to the next one, State House 13, Position 2, we don't have any numbers, so we should probably just move on from that one. The next numbers, City Council. Here we go.
Wow.
Ooh.
Here's what everybody's been talking about. Lisa Herbold. All 7 Seattle City Council races now we have numbers on, so we'll walk through them all. Lisa Herbold, 51% to Phil Tavel at 48.5%. This was she is one of the 3 incumbents that is running for re-election. There has been a lot of attention on this race because Herbold, as you both know, was one of the co-sponsors of the head tax, but she performed well in the primary. Frankly, I'm a little surprised at this number. What do you think?
I don't think Phil Tavel was as strong of a candidate as some might have thought initially. His number is probably higher than I might have expected, but I think Lisa, she gained about 3 points between the election night and the primary to the final tally, and I think we may see some of that again in this race.
It's a little too close for comfort there, so hopefully we'll see some more numbers and her lead will grow.
All right, City Council District 2, Tammy Morales, Mark Solomon. Morales ran a good primary campaign. She actually came in over 50%. This is her second time now running for office. It appears she's learned a little bit more as she has a higher number coming into the general. And I think this was a number that was more expected coming in. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, Tammy did well in the primary, so it's good to see these numbers.
All right, here's your story of the night already developing. Shama Sawant down by 8 points to Egan Orion in the highly anticipated District 3 race. There had been a lot of money poured in, especially late into backing Egan Orion. More than $1 million he has between revenue and independent expenditures. Sawant came into the primary seen as vulnerable after those primary numbers. And now I think we're going to be talking about just that margin of 8 points. Mm-hmm. And is that enough for Egan Orion to unseat Shama Sawant? Thoughts?
So to keep it close, she picked up 4 points again from election night until the final count in the primary. So this one will be really close and be decided a long time from tonight.
Mm-hmm. In 2013, she was down on election night and ended up winning that one. So it took 7 days. So
we'll keep moving on here, but to point out that progressives have traditionally voted late. Mm-hmm. We are seeing already a lot of late voters just based on the way the ballots are coming in. So I think we're going to see a lot of spin on both sides in the coming days.
Yes.
City Council District 4, Alex Peterson and Sean Scott, 58-42. I think this was a number that a lot of people expected, but Sean Scott doing much better than he did in the primary. And frankly, I think the two of you know this. He has been campaigning quite a bit in the last several weeks. Alex Peterson, not as much. So there's a question of just what Sean's number would look like. What are your thoughts on those initial numbers?
I'm glad that it's close. I feel like that's a good sign for Sean. And you're right, he has been out there knocking doors every day and organizing like crazy out in that district.
Yeah, and Peterson had run before. I don't think he ever really quite stopped between that race and this one. He has a newsletter throughout the district. This is kind of the trend we saw on election night of the primary.
D5, Deborah Juarez never lets you forget that she is from D5. She mentions it in almost every sentence, and she is looking pretty good tonight, 58-42. She's had business and labor support, unlike really any other candidate in the city of Seattle. There wasn't a lot of money put into this race, but what do you think of those initial numbers? If I can do math, 16-point difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we would hope that the incumbent would do well, and so we'll see. I think those numbers are still early.
It really was the unique race where she had sort of both sides supporting her, and she is a pretty strong candidate.
And we move on to D6. Again, one of the races that gained a lot of attention, especially in the last couple of weeks. The amount of money that was put into this race. Heidi Wills had a backing of 4-1 in terms of the money from independent expenditures from the political action committees, from her own campaign. She had been out really canvassing the last couple of weeks, and this race turned ugly in the last couple of weeks. Dan Strauss, though, 53 to 47, a 6-point margin. What's your initial take?
These races are all very close, and I think it really points to the divisions that Seattle's facing right now.
I'm still amazed by the Dan Strauss story. I mean, he literally came out of nowhere to the point that on the primary night we both asked who he was. So to withstand the money spent and still be standing is impressive. He also was a candidate who picked up votes from election night going forward.
This is just my take. I think Strauss is going to be happier with that number than Heidi Wills is on this election night. In District 7, this is downtown Queen Anne. Look at that! A margin of 203 votes. Jim Pugel, the former interim Seattle police chief, Andrew Lewis, the deputy city attorney. Lewis had more votes in the primary. Pugel had what people like to call the business backing. Lewis had more of the union backing. Between the two, they had more than $1 million in outside expenditures, political action committees, that chipped in on this race in particular. Wow, what do you think?
I'm still surprised by that, only because the district itself is just a juggernaut of kind of older, wealthier voters. And for Lewis to get that amount, either he was able to crack into that base or younger voters turned out, which I am usually a little more skeptical about, the downtown, the Pioneer Square, and those areas, uptown. So seeing how the precincts break out on that will be fascinating.
All right, let's talk more about District 3, already shaping up to be the story of the night. Egan Orion and Shama Sawant. I understand Egan Orion is now talking to his followers.
Outcome is going to be, but we're pretty sure that it's going to result in a win. And you know what? It's we've been in this race for over 7 months now. 7 months and 3 days. So what's a couple more days? So back when we started this race back in April, we just had a handful of supporters and a vision for a new type of leadership for District 3, one that embraces the lives of people who live right here in District 3 rather than focusing on a national movement that is focused on collaborative solutions rather than divisive politics, that is centered on solutions to our city's challenges rather than just sound bites. Win or lose, and most likely it's a win. I wanted to say a big thank you to all of you here tonight and to all the voters across District 3 who took a chance on this political newcomer. And throughout this campaign, there were many of you that stuck your neck out and were vocal about your support, even when it wasn't convenient or when it was uncomfortable. And for that, I owe you a deep, heartfelt debt of gratitude. So thank you very much, all you in this room and those of you that are watching tonight. I appreciate all you did to get us to this point. So some thank yous are in order. I couldn't have done this without the best campaign team in Seattle, from Kevin and Liz at Blue Wave, who led our fundraising efforts in this campaign, to Christian and Aaron at Northwest Passage, who guided us through the various storms that we passed through on the way to tonight. And to Jamie also at NWP, who worked tirelessly on the campaign. Thanks to my communications director, Joe Mirabella. Thanks for keeping us on track with messaging. Big thank you to my field manager, Harrison. And my field managers, Braden and Noel. Where's Noel at? All right, thank you, Noel. There was a bunch of field fellows that we have, and you know what? I'm going to pull out the list because you got to make sure and thank all the people that really got you to this point. So give me 1 second here. All right. I already thanked Braden and Noel. We had Ian, Logan, Megan, Rueda, Akansha, Brandon, Kiana, and Ava. Ava right here. Thank you so much to all of our field fellows and our volunteers. You really made a big difference in this campaign. You know that we knocked over 30,000 doors in this campaign, and a lot of that was possible because of them. There were also business owners who really stuck their neck out and were criticized sometimes from some in the community for their support, like Kiana and Devon from the Postman. Are you all here tonight? No, but give them a round of applause because they are amazing. Moises, who I know is here tonight from El Costeño. Moises, you're the man. Rachel from Rachel's Ginger Beer. Donna Moody from Marjorie. Paul Berryman from Corvus & Co. My friend Ian, who rents us space for our campaign. You've been an amazing community member as well, Ian. Thank you so much for all you do. Next to last, I have to thank my campaign manager. Oh, right here, standing right here. This is Olga Laskin. And I just want to thank you for enduring the ups and downs of this election. For much of those first few months, it was just the two of us out on doors and trying to figure out how we could make our campaign stand out. And we finally figured it out, didn't we, Olga? This was our first campaign individually and together, and I'm glad that we got a chance to go on that adventure. It was quite an education. So please give it up for Olga. Finally, I want to thank my family for all their support, particularly my parents. Where are you at? Where are my parents at? Are they upstairs, downstairs? Raise your hand. I know. Oh, they're on the stairway. All right. And my sister-in-law and my niece are here tonight. My brother is the guy in the cowboy hat that came. He surprised me from Arizona. My friend Thomas, who came up from Colorado, who came up during the campaign to canvass. It really takes a village to do a campaign, and I couldn't have gotten here without all of you. So, to my opponent, Shama Somant, and all of your supporters, I thank you for a spirited race and for all the work you do fighting for workers around the country. Win or lose, your team really kept our team on its toes throughout this entire election. Passions have been running high on both sides, and it's my greatest hope that after this election is officially decided that we can all come together to work collaboratively on the big challenges our city faces right now. It's been a long election.
So it sounds there, Egan Orion saying the words were pretty sure that he will be victorious tonight. That is something that I think you're right. We're going to take days to sort through. Yeah. I'll tell you on both sides of the thing before we get up to Eric Wilkinson in Snohomish County. I had a text from a person that was not a Shama Sawant fan that had been working for the business community who said, quote, game time. However, on the other side of things, another consultant working for the progressive side has already pointed out that in the primary there was a 7% change in the votes as time went on, and 4% on the plus side for Sawant. So that's what we're going to be looking at is those votes coming in. We'll get to Eric Wilkinson in a second, but those votes coming in now after Election Day and how that tightens that margin specifically in District 3. Any initial takeaways?
You know, I think it is going to be a long time until we know. I think a lot of people thought it would not be this close, and that Sawant over the years had sort of, become very well known, but also a lot of higher negatives. We're just not seeing that tonight. Those are higher numbers than I think even some of her supporters might have expected.
Yeah, I think, never count anybody out, and especially a strong woman of color. And she's come back from these races before where she's been down. So I think this is a keep an eye on it. No big victory laps just yet, and we'll see how it goes. As
you both know, you've been around long enough to know what happened with Shama Sawant and Richard Conlon and 2 election cycles ago when she got all the late votes and squeaked out a win against a longtime council member. So I understand that my colleague Eric Wilkinson is standing by with some breaking news out of Snohomish County. Eric.
Yeah, this is an absolute shocker. Incumbent Sheriff Ty Treenery has conceded the race here. He conceded about 10 minutes ago before all of the official numbers had even come in. Treenery, longtime incumbent here, 6 or 7 years, had made some very impressive progressive reforms here in this county that has been racked by drug, homeless, and addiction problems. His opponent was much more of a law and order type. A lot of people didn't really give him a shot, but he was very aggressive in his campaign. He had the support of a lot of law enforcement unions around the county, and he was able to get out there and knock on some doors and really kind of rile up people who were sick and tired of seeing crimes go, in his words, unpunished. What the sheriff had done, he was, like I said, very progressive in some of his policies. He would instead of incarcerating people who were addicts, he instead gave them a path to sobriety, trying to get them off of drugs and get them into housing and eventually get them employed again. His opponent, Adam Fortney, a longtime Snohomish County deputy, was more of a law and order kind of guy. If you committed a crime, you got locked up. I spoke with the sheriff a short time ago, and he said that that's pretty much what it came down to, that he understands that people were very frustrated. They were frustrated by having people break into their cars, steal their belongings, and then they would end up often right back on the street if they chose not to go to treatment. So again, Sheriff Ty Treenery here in Snohomish County has conceded defeat. We're not exactly sure even right now. I haven't been able to check the numbers in the past couple of minutes, but what the level, the amount of defeat was, or what the disparity was there. But he came out very early, before those numbers had even been announced, stood in front of the crowd here at the Hotel Indigo here on the Everett waterfront, said he was sorry, but everyone should go home. And he said that he also is going to now focus his efforts on helping the transition with the new sheriff here to take office and try to do what he can do to fix the drug and addiction and homelessness problems here in this county. We'll have much more on this coming up on TV pretty soon, but wow, a very shocking announcement here in Everett tonight.
A Snohomish County shocker. Thank you, Eric Wilkinson. I think we want to talk now more about I-1000. R88, it's been called a couple of different things, affirmative action. I understand that my colleague there, you see the numbers that are coming in right now. It's very close, very close, 50.1 to 49.9. Sebastian Robertson is at one of those parties and joins us now.
Yeah, the crowd erupted just a little bit ago as the numbers updated, 500,000 votes counted, and it looks like R88 was getting about a 5-point advantage. Those numbers, we'll talk a little bit about that more later, don't really mean that much at this point. The group is Washington Fairness at Stake, R88, also known as I-1000, and it's about affirmative action. Specifically, should Washington State bring it back when it comes to hiring and when it comes to public education. Many have advocated against this, saying it's unconstitutional. They don't want to see different rules for different people when it comes to hiring or education. But the fight to approve R88 has had some big names behind it. In the last 30 minutes, Governor Jay Inslee dropped in as he's making the rounds here in Seattle on election night. He briefly spoke to the crowd, but before that, we got a couple of minutes to pick his brain on what he's looking out for this election night.
We believe in equity, we believe in justice, and I'm hopeful that voters will see it this way today.
For your tenure as governor, there was no affirmative action in Washington State. Why do you feel that it's important to bring it now, after we've gone 20 years, arguably becoming even more diverse than we've ever been?
Well, I think what we have found is we have been very dedicated to try to improve people's opportunity in our state, but we're still seeing that we're limited in the tools that are available to us. So we still have a lack of diversity in some of our contracting and our educational components. So I thought this was a decent way to have common sense without quotas to make sure that we looked at everybody's talent. We want everybody's talent to be pulling on the rope in Washington. So I thought this made sense. So we'll see what the voters say. One way or another, though, we're going to continue the effort to give everybody opportunity in Washington.
Can you tell us where else you'll be tonight? What other races you're watching locally here in Seattle?
Well, I'm going to stop by the initiative that I'm hoping voters do not approve, because we really have transportation challenges in our state. We've got to be able to maintain our ferries and our bus fleets, and I would hate to see a reduction of those services. So we're going to go over and see what the voters have to say, and then we're going to keep going forward in the state of Washington.
You had a very high That was Washington State Governor Jay Inslee making his rounds here on election night. Now, he talked about diversity in contracting and in the hiring process. I want to bring in April Sims. You've been one of the vocal voices behind this. Why is this so important when it comes to the hiring and the labor practice?
Well, this gives us an opportunity to level the playing field for women, veterans, people of color, the disabled, seniors, and provide more fairness and opportunity for all of Washingtonians. It's a really exciting election night.
I think that something that didn't help anybody was how confusing this seemingly was on the ballot. You know, do you vote yes, R88, 1000? Do you think that you were able to get to the voter and clear up what this really is about?
Well, we certainly worked as hard as we could. We knew our opposition was going to run a confusion campaign, hoping that voters would elect out of voting at all tonight because of the difference and the confusion between referendums and initiatives. But we ran a really aggressive voter campaign and communication plan, and we're confident that that'll show in tonight's results.
Do these results mean anything to you?
It's still early. I mean, it's certainly, I'd rather be on this side of the results than on the other side of the results, but we're still cautiously optimistic and watching the numbers as they come in.
I'll let you keep working the room here. We'll check back in with you later in the night.
Thanks so much.
So we heard from April, we heard from Jay Inslee. We're also told that former Governor Gary Locke, who's been very vocal in this campaign to approve R88 I-1000, we're told that he's expected to make an appearance here at some point this evening. We have yet to see him. And one more point before I toss it back. I tried to pin Jay Inslee down. You know, he's fresh off the campaign trail, and I asked him, who do you like in the Democratic presidential race? And he wouldn't give me a name, but did say that he would support the party's nominee. There you go. A little ambiguity on election day. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Sebastian. We are going to turn from one initiative to the other because we're getting more results in on I-976. We told you earlier we only had the King County numbers. Now we're getting in the numbers from across the state, including in Pierce County, where people are voting to approve the $30 car tabs by almost 2-1. That number has swung almost a 10-point differential in what I'm looking at in front of me here from the Secretary of State's office, and along with our data you see there on King 5. This is what I think some people expected, a lot of political observers expected. There was momentum to change the car tabs. Tim Eyman has tapped into something. Granted, these are just the first numbers, but what do you think?
It's not looking very good for the people that wanted to keep the money into mass transit, particularly Sound Transit. This state has had a long history of voting down high car tabs, always at the hand of Eyman as well. So it's not a total surprise we're looking at numbers like this tonight, but a lot of money was spent, and I think people expected maybe a little bit different outcome.
Yes, it's, we always hope in King County that, what we're going for will be what will happen across the state. But, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at Eastern Washington, a lot of the results still not in, and I think there's a belief that they will also largely vote yes on I-976. Now, my colleague Glenn Farley is at a no on I-976 campaign event, and he joins us now with reaction. Glenn.
So right now I am next to Senator Reuven Carlisle. He is he's really kind of a money guy in the Senate. We were talking a little bit earlier. This is not looking promising for the no campaign here. If this Eyman initiative is successful, what basically comes next? Do you really have your work cut out for you?
Yeah, look, I mean, we know, of course, it's too early to tell. It's early in the evening, and there's a lot of votes on all fronts to be counted statewide. At the same time, this is really serious, and there's a lot of implications for rural areas, a lot of issues for transit, a lot of issues associated with ferries. I mean, there's a whole bunch of funds that are funded by this fee, and so it's a really open and serious question about what it takes to figure that out and deconstruct the options.
when you one of the arguments that Tim Eyman has made, well, pay for it with the rainy day fund. Those two don't match up, do they?
Yeah, they just don't. I mean, people have an image that we have one modest savings account as a state in our regular operating, in our normal budget. It's like your normal family budget. And we have a little bit of savings, and we need to hold on to that. The fact of the matter is that you can't spend that 3, 4, 5 times from transportation and operating budget and capital infrastructure like schools and buildings and others. So lots of people want to spend that. It's a modest savings account, and every family in the state knows that you just can't spend your one savings account 3 times.
I mean, everybody looks at this as a car tab thing, but just looking from the Office of Financial Management, I mean, there's stuff in there like for like snowmobiles, ferries, law enforcement through the Washington State Patrol. I mean, there's at least a dozen line items that are paid for by these various items that are covered just under this one car tabs provision.
That's right. It was a very simple narrative, but truthfully, it's a very complex underpinning relative to all of those funds. As you said, lots of rural, smaller rural funds, ferries, transit, just lots of programs. So it's a very serious and somber a bit of work to figure this out if it continues in this direction.
Senator Reuven Carlisle, thank you very much. We're going to go back to you guys.
That it happened. But then they're going to have to say to themselves, well, next year's an election year, and I'd really like to be reelected. And we do have a pot of money, $3.5 billion, that we've got to be able to backfill these programs that they say are worth about $600 million a year. There's more than enough money there to be able to backfill the affected programs. And you have to ask yourself the question, you just got through saying that death, destruction, the end of Western civilization will occur if we do not fund these programs. Well, if that's true, why wouldn't you take a fraction of the money that you have, the reserve money, the money that's the surplus, and use it to backfill the programs?
Do you think they will tap into the rainy day fund?
I think what you're always going to have, and you always have to remember, is the pigs at the trough, the ones that spent the $5 million, are very powerful. And they're going to go to every elected official and they're going to say, give me that money. Give me that money. Because the voters said no to this tax, but they didn't say no to our program. They love our program. And the beauty of the initiative process is they're not going to just give them the money, they're going to have to earn it. They're going to have to re-justify themselves. And I think that's going to be an extremely positive thing for them to have to go through the process of going to a hearing and saying, we currently get money from this dishonest tax that the voters just rejected, but we want some money to replenish that money. And will the politicians give them that money? It's an election year. It's what they did 20 years ago.
You've declared victory. The initial numbers look good. You were outspent by a bigger margin than that.
Yeah.
What was it that got this passed?
I think it was their $5 million, honestly. I mean, I think they helped us. I really do. It would be, frankly, tactically smarter for me to say the margin would have been higher if they hadn't spent that $5 million. But advertising has to be persuasive. You have to believe it. And if you're told 30, 40 times that vote no on this initiative because bridges will fall, you have to believe that. And it's just not believable when the Skagit Valley Bridge got knocked down by a truck and not because we weren't paying enough in taxes. So I think fundamentally the reason why it passed, I gotta say, Sound Transit. I mean, Sound Transit just lied. They lied so many times. They lied to the legislature, lied to the voters, lied to the Attorney General, they lied to the Supreme Court. It catches up with you. You know, when you say to people, your car tabs only go up $80 and you get a bill for $800, kind of makes you mad. And so I think that is probably a big contributing factor to it.
What was the message sent tonight?
Message sent tonight, God, that's a great one. Should have thought about it, shouldn't I? Honesty won. Honesty won. Voters want it to be honest, and I think they believed that we were correct, that it was a dishonest tax. So I think honesty won at the ballot box because the voters finally had a chance to be able to go, enough with the dishonest tax, let's bring in something that's actually honest. And under the initiative, it says if they're ever going to bring it back, they have to use Kelley Blue Book, which is market value. And I think voters would be willing to be open to that if they had another crack at it.
The
So.
governor we just spoke to is saying we need to keep counting the votes. You are declaring victory right now. What's your message to the governor?
God, there's just so many things.
Ew.
Me. That's hard.
You're talking about honesty.
I was talking about honesty. It's really hard.
honest.
What's that?
Be honest.
Be honest. All right.
What?
We are. We're going to talk over that because we couldn't quite tell what Tim Eyman was whispering about there. But you did hear him declare publicly victory in his battle to get car tabs back down to $30. What do you think?
It's painful. It's painful to see the results. It's painful to watch Tim Eyman gloat like that. I think it speaks to the different experiences that folks are having on the western side of the state versus, the eastern side of the state. We tried to solve transportation for many, many years. We thought SD3 was going to be able to do it, and this definitely does set us back quite a bit. So it is unfortunate.
You kind of think of these stories where we see Medina is struggling under a lack of property taxes that is directly attributable to a past Eyman initiative on the 1% cap. And then we were told that would not be painful. So I think sometimes there is some discussion after the fact. I do think Eyman is correct in saying the Sound Transit car tabs seem to have struck a chord with many people, and I think it may have helped suppress that vote in King County that would have been needed to win statewide.
That's why I keep looking at Pierce County, and granted these are the first numbers, but it's 2-1 there. Mm-hmm. This station has done tons of stories down in Pierce County about ST3 when people started getting their car tabs and the sticker shock involved, and the fact that a majority of that project was not going to Pierce County. It adds up to a lot of voter unrest in Pierce County in particular, and I think that is going to have an impact on these numbers here with 976. That's just me talking. Yeah. There's a lot of other things going on in King County that I know that Shasti, you've been involved in particular. Bellevue is one of the first series of races that we have graphics ready to go on. Tell us about Bellevue and what you were watching there tonight.
Yes, so Seattle often takes up a lot of the space when we think about King County, but there's races across on the eastern side of the county and South County. And in Bellevue, we had 4 diverse candidates that were running against some incumbents in city council races, and we were really hoping to see a big bump for them and to be able to really make sure that Bellevue reflects the population.
There's your first one, John Stokes, who's been the mayor at one point in Bellevue, 69-31.
It's great. We endorsed John Stokes. He's been a good member of that city council.
And moving through Bellevue City Council 3, and driving through Bellevue, I saw a lot of ads for Jeremy Barksdale.
Jeremy Barksdale, one of the young talents, really played it well, in that he organized really well, really spoke to Bellevue values, understood that community really well. This is exciting to see. I think he's going to really add a lot of great energy to the city council.
And moving on to the next set of numbers, Bellevue City Council Position 5. What do you think?
That's great. Jana Zahn has served on City Council previously, has done a great job, Asian American woman, and it's great to see her keep her seat.
So some diversity there on the council tonight based on what we are seeing. This has been an interesting race because Jennifer Robertson has been around for a while. James Bible, the former head of the local chapter of the NAACP, he's been a prominent attorney here in town.
Yes, we knew this race was going to be tough. James Bible comes from an NAACP background. He stood up for several victims of gun violence, and so we knew that this might be a hard race to win in Bellevue. Those numbers actually are a little bit better, I believe, than he did in the primary, but Jennifer has served the council well.
He also is my one sports reference of the night because he was one of the last players for the Western Washington University Viking football team before Western disbanded that. So there you go. There's your useless information of the night about James Bible. Sammamish now. City council positions. I know you were paying some attention to Sammamish.
Yes, Sammamish was another city out on the eastern side of the county where we were really hoping to see that some diversity and diversity of thought would make it onto the city council. It is disappointing to see these results. It's looking like none of our folks that we endorse are going to make it. And
for those of you that may just be tuning in, Shasti Conrad, the head of the King County Democrats. So as we continue to look across Sammamish, you're saying the candidates you endorsed tonight, not looking good. Not looking good. Ratuja Indapur had run previously and had faced racism at the doors.
racial slurs, so that's disappointing to see.
Okay, let's look at SeaTac. There's a race where the two candidates are separated by 19 points.
Wow. So this is another. The SeaTac is a city where we really went all in. We did everything we could for canvassing and getting out there. So yeah, this is where every vote matters. It really does. Look at these. It's very close.
Peter Kwan and Damiana Merriweather.
Yes, we had endorsed Damiana Merriweather, and so it's disappointing to see those numbers, but yeah, they're all close. Tekele Gobina is an incredible candidate, Ethiopian immigrant. We really were going all in for him, so no, numbers are close. Mohammed Igal, Somali immigrant. We were hoping Aaron Sitterly is the current mayor of SeaTac and is Trump-loving and is photographed with AK-47s, and so we were really hoping that we could make sure that SeaTac City Council reflected the city. So disappointing to see that number.
All right, we're going to go back to Seattle City Council. Thank you for the insight on those races. Again, we're going to try and move through these relatively quick. Lisa Herbold, in case you're just joining us, the incumbent, one of the three incumbents running for re-election, up 51.5 to 48.5. She had a bigger margin in the primary, so I think that the fact that they're only separated by 530 votes here, Phil Tavel's probably happy about that, but it's going to be days before we get a final answer. Tammy Morales up 12 points, 56 to 44. I think a lot of people who have observed that race believe that those numbers are falling in line with some of the predictions ahead of the ballots dropping tonight. If we go on to District 3, again, if there is one of these races that becomes the story over the next several days, it is this one. Shama Sawant and Egan Orion. Shama Sawant, the incumbent, looking for a third term. It's fair to say she is a polarizing person in Seattle government. She has had a lot of money dumped in towards her challenger, Egan Orion. There is an 8-point separation. Egan Orion said he was, quote, pretty sure this means a win for him. But what did Shama Sawant have to say?
We have always had to fight hard. So we are going to have to continue to fight hard. We are going to have to make sure that every ballot of otherwise disenfranchised people gets to count. Are we ready to do that?
What are your thoughts? I have thoughts. What are your thoughts?
You know, I think she's not in a bad spot. I know that she's down by 8, but really it's 4 and change. So she's just to get over 50. She said something interesting about every vote being counted, because you can do, you can take ballots that may have had a signature that was out of whack and go and get it re-signed and brought back into count if you think it's from a precinct that will help you. And we could see that in this race in particular.
Yes, again, like I said, don't count her out. I have a feeling these races in Seattle will take a couple of days before we have real results.
I'll just say, historical reference, 4 years ago, she was at 56%. That race wasn't even close, but the election cycle before that, as you both know, with Richard Conlin, that was the race which brought Shama Sawant into power. She was down for several days, but all the late ballots went her way, and she squeaked out a victory against a former Seattle City Council president. And there is a Democratic strategist, a progressive strategist, who is saying if you look at the primary numbers, there was a 7% swing from the day the ballots dropped to the final tally. That was a 4-point change for Shama Sawant. So I think you will see, as we talked about off the top, there will be a spin from both sides here as we continue to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things we haven't had a chance to touch on yet, King County Council. There are numerous races there. There is one in particular that's going to get, I think, more attention than any of the others, and that is Gurmai Zahili. You know, I sent out an all-staff email about the pronunciation of his name, and I screwed it up already. Yes, he is running against Larry Gossett, the longtime King County Council member who has been in power since 1993. He has not had a challenger since 1999, and now at this point, if we look at the numbers, he is 14 points down to Gurmai Zahili. Zahile. Let's do it together. Yes, after I sent out an all-staff email, I bungled it twice. What are your thoughts here on the margin of error, or the margin between the two?
I think this was what we were hoping for. If you looked at the August primary results, Gurmai also had a pretty large lead over Larry Gossett, so this feels right.
GZ, I'm told, is on the podium right now.
Yes.
Okay. All right, is this one working? Yes. Woo! Look at this turnout! I think we had a smooth, like, 40 people at the primary night party.
Yeah, primary team.
I don't know how many people we have in here now, but it's a hell of a lot more than 40. I'm kind of like 300, 1,000, I don't know. For all the journalists in here report that 2,000 people came to their election night party. How's everybody feeling? Are you ready to get after it? For those of you who know, rain or shine, get out the vote! Rain or shine, get out the vote! Rain or shine, get out the vote! You love to see it. You love to see it. Okay, so before we dive in, before we pull up the results, I want to pull up a little video that I've made just to show that it truly takes a village. This is not about one candidate. It is about the people who get involved. It's about the issues, and it truly takes a village to make this happen. We don't know if we won yet, but no matter what happens, I'm thankful, and I wanted to just show a little video that just shows how many people were involved in this. You won!
All right, that was Gurmai. He's very happy tonight. I think for people who are going to find out more about his background now, he's going to inject some youth into the King County Council for sure. He went to Stanford, Penn Law, was an Obama White House intern, so he has some credibility. And what's been interesting about that race is he has not run a negative campaign. He has said, hey, I love Larry Gossett. I've grown up with Larry Gossett. We both went to the same high school. So it was a little interesting watching that play out.
Yeah, we've seen that at the King County Council. Many have been stayed maybe a term too long and get knocked out by somebody who's willing to knock on doors. And we see that in the energy in youth, and it's a very typical thing in politics, but it's always a little hard to see too when somebody with the experience of Councilmember Gossett heads out the door.
And I want to also point out, I mean, look at that crowd that was in that room for him. You know, I think that's really speaking to, you got to run people who reflect their communities and bring that energy. And he really organized the heck out of that district and really worked hard for it. So it's really great to see that victory.
Well, and we haven't talked a whole lot yet about the money and the amount of money that has come in. Of course, a lot of focus has been on Amazon, the money that they donated to the Political Action Committee, that is the official arm of the chamber, otherwise known as CASE. CASE, going into tonight, had $2.6 million in donations, but there had been a lot of political action committees going down the line. Moms for Seattle, People for Seattle, the Seattle firefighters had their own, SEIU, Unite Here, Seattle Hospitality. So there were union PACs along with business PACs, but the emails, as I'm sure you're looking at your phone every once in a while, are starting to come in. And the folks behind the Civic Alliance for a Progressive Economy, which had been backing some of the more progressive candidates, their headline already, corporate hostile takeover bid for Seattle election bombs. Can we say that yet?
Give me about 3 days.
The chamber is taking a more pragmatic approach, saying that they are looking forward to the results tomorrow. Tonight's initial returns not definitive enough to call these close races. We know that from our polling that voters want more solutions and less ideology from their council members.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, you're right. It's going to take a few days, but a couple of those races in particular, going back to D7, that is going to be extremely close over the next few days. I think going into tonight, the over-under was maybe 3 or 4 of these races. You'd say there's enough of a margin where you think you know who might win, but D7, D3, D6, maybe to a lesser extent, look like they may take a couple of days.
And I think everybody in these districts felt like they got a lot of mail, but that starts to have diminishing returns for the campaigns as well. Can you spend too much? Are you starting to just join a pile that's going straight to the recycle bin? It's hard to, when you're not able to buy a wall-to-wall television, which even isn't what it used to be in terms of when it was the only medium, to really drop a safe on an election and say, oh, we're just going to win it with our money. And I think we're seeing that in some of these races tonight.
Yeah, I think the soul of Seattle is trying to figure out whether or not it's going to maintain its progressive, sense of self, or whether it's going to be able to be bought. And we're seeing those dynamics play out, and no one should call victory just yet.
Yeah, I mean, that D3 case or race that may take a few days to decide could be a swing. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about a business-backed council, a progressive-backed council, labor-backed council, and you may have a 5-4 split at the end of all this, with two of those positions not up for re-election in Teresa Mosqueda and Lorena Gonzalez.
Yes.
And this was a city a year ago that looked like, at least on any polling I saw, soundly rejected the employee head tax. So there's sort of a pendulum swing here. The D7 race is almost more interesting to me, frankly, than D3, just because it is so close, and that was a district that I didn't think was as progressive as it might be looking tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And as we talked about, $1 million just in political action committee money into that one race. Unions really backed Andrew Lewis. The business community backed the former interim police chief in Jim Pugel. That tells you just the thought on both sides about whether that seat was right for the taking.
Mm-hmm.
I think you saw that in D6 as well, with the amount of money that went towards Heidi Wills.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you made an interesting point earlier about the democracy vouchers and how 10 out of 14 of the candidates opted out of the democracy voucher program. So I think, campaign finance reform is something that we're going to be working on for years to come. And I think we're figuring out how we need to actually make sure that people uphold something like a democracy voucher program.
One thing worth saying that I start every campaign class with, it is ultimately the candidate and quality of the candidate that decides most races. And so even with money being spent, if it's somebody that doesn't connect with the voters, doesn't speak to their values, or get them really excited to vote, you really can't drag them across the line usually.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got about a minute left in this live broadcast without any commercial breaks. Biggest surprise so far of the night for both of you?
I thought 976 would swing. It seemed pretty clear from my vantage point, and so I think that is surprising. And the fact that some of these races are as close as they are, that it really is going to take a couple of days to call. I thought we might have some more clear direction for a number of these races.
I would agree. I think it's the city council races being as close as they are. There were a few in my office pool that I had a little more spread. I don't think we touched on D4 in King County, but I think I saw Councilmember Cole Wells was ahead, which is sort of the inverse of the second race where Councilmember Goss is going out the door, where maybe a more tenured council member is holding off a younger upstart.
Yeah, I think that one is 74-26, according to my tabulations.
Elections are crazy.
Yes, Jeannie Cole Wells looking pretty strong on this election night. We are going to have much more election coverage throughout the evening. You have multiple opportunities to take a look at these numbers. We have a lot of content for you online, king5.com. We're going to be coming up at 9 o'clock on Kong with more analysis, more reports from all of the parties. And then at 10 o'clock once again. And then we'll wrap it all up for you. King 5 News tonight at 11. So stay tuned. There's more reaction to come and more breakdown of the numbers on what's been already an exciting election night in Washington State. Thanks for watching.
Sexual harassment, against inequality in the workplaces, and we have a world to win. That's right, we do. To replace the bankrupt system of capitalism with a socialist world based on solidarity, democracy, and sustainability. I hope that you will join us in that longer struggle. I hope you will join Socialist Alternative, and I hope you will join us in the ongoing struggle to win this election campaign, because when we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. Solidarity, and let's keep going.
Here. doors, and I could not be more thankful for the sacrifice y'all made over every single weekend. Give them a round of applause. All of the volunteers. Thank you so much. And again, I shouted out the people who've come like a few dozen times, but every single one of you who've come once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, give everybody a round of applause. Thank you. I want to shout out everybody who donated to this campaign. Raise your hand if you donated even $1. We started this campaign and we said we will not accept a single dime from corporate PACs or corporations.
Good evening. It is election night. Ballot drop boxes closed about an hour ago, and we are getting our first look at numbers from across the state of Washington. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Mark Wright.
I'm Greg Copeland. City council races, card tab fees, and the fate of affirmative action will all be decided in this general election. We have team coverage tonight with teams in Pierce, Snohomish, King County. We begin, though, with the biggest pocketbook issue on the ballot, and that is card tab fees. That measure is trying to reduce vehicle tabs to just $30.
King 5's Drew Mickelson is covering the Yes on 976 campaign in Bellevue, backed by the polarizing initiative promoter Tim Eyman. Drew, good evening.
Good evening, guys. Tim Eyman declared victory just a little bit after 8:30. He knows there's still a lot of votes that are expected to come in. He was paying close attention to which counties had come in, and once he saw the way that things were going, the last numbers that I saw were about 54 to 46 in favor, he decided to declare victory. He declared victory technically before the polls even closed. He had a yes on 976 cake. He was predicting a 65% yes turnout, or I guess victory. His numbers are not looking that strong, but they were strong enough for him to declare victory about a half an hour ago. He says that this was really a decision that came down to honesty. He said honesty won. He felt like, and he campaigned on the fact that voters, in his opinion, had been misled by Sound Transit in 2016, and voters were upset when they saw their card tab bills, in some cases doubling, tripling, and he says that sticker shock got people to vote in this election in favor of Tim Eyman's initiative. What this will mean to the state is something that we'll be discussing in Olympia, across the state, for months, if not years to come, because there were billions of dollars at stake. Those car tabs that have been several hundreds of dollars, even more than $1,000 for some folks, are going to go down to $30 a piece now, at least under this initiative. There will be likely some legal challenges. I can guarantee you lawmakers are already working up some ways to find patchwork for these dollars that, as of right now, do not appear to be coming back to the state. If this does go to a legal battle, Attorney General Bob Ferguson, as Attorney General, has to represent the initiative. So Tim Eyman noted that was ironic, that perhaps one of his loudest critics over the years may end up being someone who has to defend the initiative should it end up passing tonight. And as we say, the early numbers are definitely in Tim Eyman and I-976's favor. Live in Bellevue, Drew Mickelson, King 5 News.
All right, Drew, thank you. And there are estimates that would cut about $4 billion in transportation projects over 6 years. So the fallout would be enormous if 976 passes. We now want to turn to the opponents of 976 to get their reaction.
King 5's Glenn Farley is covering that part of the story tonight from Seattle. Glenn.
Well, I'm going to talk a little quiet here because they're making some speeches, but we are at the No on 976 meeting right now. And I want to pan up right now to the map on the wall, and this is what's not good news. No, they're not conceding this yet, but basically every county you see that's posted so far, and that's most of them, that is green, are counties that have said yes to this. The counties that are yellow, basically there's about 4 of them up there are the ones that have rejected this so far, and even King County, where you have most of the votes, that is the single biggest concentrated place. This is not rejecting it by enough to sort of counteract all of this, but there is a lot yet left to go. Now, one of the people that I talked to earlier tonight is Senator Reuven Carlisle of Seattle. He's on the Ways and Means Committee in the state Senate, and I asked him, I said, how do you deal with this if, in fact, the Iman initiative ends up winning?
In the state of Washington and
Glenn Farley in Seattle. Now, in the last several weeks, our Angela Russell has been following the money in this election. She joins us now live with, more on who spent what on this campaign, because we know a lot of money was spent here.
Yeah, this is the most fun part, don't you think?
Yeah.
I call this particular race my David and Goliath story. And not that there is a villain or a hero, but just in terms of resources. So if you can picture that. On one side, the campaign supporting I-976, the $30 tabs, not a lot of money raised, lots of small donations. In fact, less than $100,000 raised. But take a look at the opposition. The PAC, Keep Washington Rolling, raised more than $4 million. Actually, I was looking tonight. In the last few weeks, they went up to $500,000. That was 40 times more than Tim Iman and the group's lobbying for those $30 tabs. So where did this money come from? Take a look. Amazon, $400,000. Microsoft, $650,000. Corporations and employees who believe they have a lot to lose. And look at all these other companies, Alaska Airlines, CenturyLink, T-Mobile, so many involved there. And then I want you to take a look at this next graphic because it's also important. If we can scroll out to that, I think that's coming in just a moment. If it doesn't, I think the big question here, was all of this money spent enough to sway voters to keep them from wanting to pay these higher car tab fees? And it's looking like, based on the results, that was not the case. So again, $5 million spent to oppose this $30 car tab initiative.
What's really
compared to $100,000.
It's crazy. What's interesting, Washington State doesn't have a state income tax.
Right.
The money has to come from somewhere, but yet we still have one of the highest tax burdens in the nation. So they get the money from somewhere. But how we pay for roads is really an interesting question, isn't it?
It really is. I took a deep dive into our tax structure a couple of months ago. We have the highest gasoline tax, the highest sales tax, one of the highest sales taxes in the country. It's almost like we're being nickeled and dimed. And then some people do argue, if we had the state income tax and lowering some of the others, would that make a big difference? People can debate that all day. At the end of the day, if you're going to vote for $30 car tabs, a lot of people wanted to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Angela, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, King 5 is tracking every development on this election night.
Let's head to King 5's Chris Daniels in the newsroom now with political professor Marco Lowe from Seattle University and Shasti Conrad. She's the chair of the King County Democrats. Guys?
Yes, and we are reacting right out of the gate to Initiative 976, what looks to have a healthy margin for approval. And sitting next to me, yes, Shasti Conrad and Marco Lowe. And let's talk about 976. I mean, the one thing that jumped out to me that I was looking at going into this election was Pierce County, where a lot of people were upset when they first got their bills from Sound Transit 3, and where tonight it looks like this initiative is passing 2-1. What are your initial thoughts on 976?
I think you're exactly right. Pierce County and even Snohomish County have gotten maybe more tax sensitive over the years, as King County has gotten a little less. So they're not part of that statewide progressive coalition to carry things statewide, and I think we're seeing that reflected tonight.
I think, as always in King County, we hope that the way we go in King County is how it'll go across the state, but it definitely shows that there's a different experience for the rest of the state. We were hoping that 976 would help with the traffic problem over here, and I think unfortunately it means we're going to be stuck in traffic for a while longer.
Yeah, and keep in mind, obviously the Sound Transit issue affected a 3-county area, but really it's the entire state that's voting on this initiative, and you see the numbers there on your screen. A healthy margin that will have to be made up for this initiative to be rejected, the $30 car tabs, and it'll be interesting to see what happens at every municipal meeting, every meeting of Sound Transit, how everybody reacts to this with the amount of money that is being discussed. Metro Transit potentially could see a huge loss here of revenue. There's state revenue, there's city revenue. The Sound Transit numbers, Sound Transit had warned in advance a $13 billion difference in funding the project overall. So there are going to be some ramifications to this vote, and that is all dependent on what happens with the legal challenge. Now, looking at referendum 88, the numbers on your screen, what do you think of what we've seen so far on R88, I-1000, the votes coming in statewide?
They're very close. It looks like only about a 1% differential. That makes me nervous. I hoped that it would be a much wider margin as well, but there's been a lot of voter confusion, the way that the referendum was written, how they collected signatures. I think there was a lot of confusion as to what exactly people were voting on and what they should choose on that, and I think that may be what we're seeing.
And it was also lower profile. I think sometimes there was a point that Iman said, sometimes the ads against me may have helped me, and there was really no advertising on this race. So people probably were first introduced to it when they saw it on the ballot.
And those are the numbers again. This is the affirmative action issue. And you see, yes, a lot of confusion on this. Perhaps is an indicator on the numbers we see, but you see a margin statewide of about a little over 12,600 votes. 12682 is the exact number on that one. So these are just a couple of the initiatives. We're going to be coming back talking about the Seattle City Council, some of the races around King County, where there's also been some interesting numbers as well. Marco Lowe, Shasti Conrad. We'll see you a bit later. Back to you.
Okay. Thanks to the three of you.
All right, now to the race for Seattle City Council District 3. That's between incumbent Shama Sawant and challenger Egan Orion. Let's head live now to King 5's Natalie Swaby, who is with the Sawant campaign in Seattle. Natalie.
Yeah, well, Sawant, trying to seek a third term, is trailing in the District 3 council race. Challenger Egan Orion, a first-time candidate, is ahead by 8 points. I'm going to show you the room right now. There's still supporters that are lingering around. She spoke to the crowd here for 30 minutes. She did remind them this is the first batch of numbers. It's not over. She told the room that they are going to need to fight hard. Now, she says that this election will decide who will run Seattle. She says, will it be Amazon and big business or the working people? Sawant, she's a socialist city council member. She says she can't be bought. She criticized her challenger, Orion, saying a lot of corporate money flowed into his campaign. She says what she's about is rent control, a Green New Deal. She's in favor of taxing big business and using that money to help the homeless and for housing. And she also says she's been in close races before and she's been able to win. She encouraged people in this room to stick with her through this struggle, and she says she's going to keep fighting. Right now we want to turn to Ted Land, who is with the Orion campaign. Ted, I'll send it over to you.
Well, Natalie, Egan Orion is calling this a win. As soon as that first batch of returns came into the party here, there was a loud cheer. He got up in front of the crowd, started giving what really sounded like a victory speech to his supporters, thanking Shama Sawant for what he said was a spirited campaign and for keeping his campaign on its toes. He thanked the crowd for backing a political newcomer. And this has been a very closely watched race, Natalie, as you know, with the attacks really increasing in recent weeks. Sawant's team on almost every street corner here on Capitol Hill, reminding voters of the money from Amazon and big business, which went to back Egan Orion in this campaign. But those efforts apparently not enough to push her ahead of him at this point in the race. I spoke with Egan Orion right after those results came in. Here's some of what he told us.
I'm concerned too. I don't want unlimited amounts of money coming into our local elections. And I said this publicly when Amazon dropped that $1 million in the last days before the ballots dropped, that I just felt like that was outsized for our little district races around the city. And, because we're doing fine here in District 3, we had raised an unprecedented amount with our own campaign. And so we had all the tools to reach out to voters. I think that it became a distraction in the final days of the election. And I would love to see Citizens United overturned so that we can limit the money, not eliminate the money, but limit the money from outside groups that come into our elections.
So even without the results tallied in their final form, Egan Orion saying this is most likely a win for his campaign and a decidedly celebratory atmosphere here at his party as his supporters cheer for him and the party gets underway. It's a very, very spirited celebration here tonight for him as he upsets apparently the incumbent in this race. Live on Capitol Hill, Ted Land, King 5 News.
Okay, Ted, thanks. We'll get back to you in a little bit. We are just getting started with our election coverage tonight. We have a lot more results and reaction to bring you all throughout this hour, and we've made it easier to find election results. All you have to do is text the word results to 206-448-4545, and we will send you a link.
Coming up, an internet provider battle in Tacoma. Should the city hand control to a private company? Find out what happened in tonight's vote.
Also on the run, an armed purse snatcher leads police on a lengthy chase weaving through downtown.
And the fog is already making a comeback. Some places have visibility below 1 mile. I'll show you what's going on and how long it'll last.
You're watching King 5 News on this election night. More election results online and on the air throughout the evening. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to King 5's election night coverage. There are a number of very close races. Let's break down the races for Seattle City Council so far. In Council Position 1, incumbent Lisa Herbold has a slight lead right now, 51.5% to Phil Tavel's 48.5%.
All right, let's get you now to District or Council 2. That's Tammy Morales right now leading Mark Solomon, 56 to 44%.
And this is the big one, Seattle City Council Position 3 that we just talked about. Incumbent Kshama Sawant is trailing right now her challenger, Egan Orion, a civic leader from Capitol Hill, who has 54% of the vote right now.
All right, get us to Seattle City Council 4 position. Alex Peterson with 58% of the vote. They're leading Sean Scott with just 42% tonight.
And let's move on. Seattle City Council Position 5, incumbent Deborah Juarez with a fairly comfortable lead so far against her challenger, Ann Davison Sattler, 58% to 42%.
And in Council Position number 6, Dan Strauss with 53% over Heidi Wills with 47%.
Let's move on to District 7. Jim Pugel, former police chief here in Seattle, has a slight lead over his challenger, Andrew Lewis. And it's important to remember only 3 incumbents are in this race. 4 new faces will sit on the Seattle City Council, but at this point, Jim Pugel has a slight lead over Andrew Lewis. All right, we're looking live at the Aurora Bridge here in Seattle. WashDOT says it is ending emergency closures early. Great news for drivers. It will reopen all lanes in time for the morning commute tomorrow. Last week, WashDOT reduced the bridge to 2 lanes in each direction so crews could fix a corroded beam.
We now know the name of the 2 kids killed in Linwood, a Linwood apartment fire. The Snohomish County Medical Examiner says 15-year-old Victoria Jimenez Lopez and 7-year-old Mardoquio Jimenez Lopez died from smoke inhalation in Sunday's fire. The medical examiner has ruled the deaths were accidental.
Seattle police are still looking for a man who snatched a purse from a woman today, took off, fired a gun into the ground, sparking a police chase. This happened this morning near 20th Avenue and Northwest Market Street in Ballard. That robber stole the purse and led police on a chase through Aurora Avenue North. Eventually, officers lost sight of him all the way down here in our neighborhood, the Soto district.
It's a little scary. I don't think I've heard of something like that happening in Ballard on like Market Street and plain daylight and just very random.
Security cameras at Bella Nails and Spa show the initial scuffle and the man pulling out that gun today. Tonight, he is still at large.